The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spent a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. Still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, a group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
Aloha everyone, I'm geologist Philip Ong, here with Mr. Dane DuPont of HawaiiTracker.com, bringing you guys another Hawaiian Volcano Tracker update. Today is Friday, December 9th, 2022. It is day 12 of Maunaloa's Northeast Rift Eruption, Dane. And today we've seen the continuation of the trend from yesterday, where we have even less lava, and that means that we have very, very low fountains now. So yesterday we had a little bit less lava and it was stickier and it was causing some higher fountain bursts and some pulsations, all of that kind of thing. And today it's back down to a whole lower gear altogether. And live on the screen between us here is a live view of the Fissure 3 vent. You can't really see any fountains shooting up there at all. There's little bursts of spatter, it seems, down inside of that thing. But overall, another big reduction in activity today from yesterday.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting thing is just to consider, like how much it's changed in the past 48 hours. We went from a pretty high fusion rate into a lower fusion rate in the high fountains, right up to 400 feet or higher, and then into this very low fusion rate where we're still getting lava, it looks like in the back of that cone, and then running out into the old channel, but in a very small substream within that vacated channel. So it's really interesting just to see how much has changed in the past 48 hours.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely still coming out there. It looks more like a trickle than that torrent we saw before. So it's not quite turned off. We'll show you guys the updated videos and maps and all of that today here as we consider the changes here today. Anything else before we get into it, Dane?
Well, I think that's it for now. And if anybody has any questions, make sure to get them into the chat, and we'll try and give a swing at them later in the program.
Mahalo for that. All right, so let's put the video big on the screen here. This is the live view into that Fissure 3, and maybe you can occasionally see a little burst of spatter from right in the center right in there. This is looking down as kind of a long feature. The cone is very elongated. We're looking right at the mouth of it, so you can't really see the full depth of it, but there's almost two sections. This front section here, where the lava trickle is visible, but then there's this back section with all this fume, and there's actually a hole in there, and the lava is bubbling inside of there as well. Remember, this cone is roughly 100 feet high, or maybe a little higher since it grew in the last couple of days. So you can still have something like a 30-foot, 20-foot fountain deep inside this thing that's not really visible from the outside, and it looks a lot less like nothing's going on. So remember the scale here, that it's definitely down quite a bit, but it's not down to zero yet, and so that is really the crux of what's ahead of us here, is seeing if this eruption follows that normal pattern, the average pattern. We've heard the USGS say for a while that the average eruption from this area of the Northeast Rift is around 2.5 weeks, less than a month, more or less, right? So is this eruption going to be one of these average ones where it shuts down in this amount of time? It'll be 2 weeks this weekend. Or could it be one of these subset of rare eruptions that can have a longer lasting, lower effusion rate that is like a longer lasting eruption with low volume? So the USGS has not excluded that possibility yet. We'll look at that a little bit more too, but that's also preparing for the worst possible case, which is that it would kind of continue for a long time in the style of pool. But really, on average, that's not my personal expectation, and we have to wait and see what actually happens here. So let me move through to show you guys the time lapse of that vent from high fountains yesterday overnight to low fountains here, and then down to that really low bubbling you see in the vent there. I'll play it one more time. High fountains and bubbling down overnight, about the height of that cone, and then really a lot lower over the course of today. So that's a little visual summary of what's happened. Let's turn to the USGS updates. This is the one from this morning, just before 9 a.m. And the highlighted changes here. Fissure 3 vent continues to erupt with a reduced supply of lava and reduced gas emissions this morning. As of 7 a.m. today, December 9th, activity at the Fissure 3 vent significantly reduced, producing low fountains that feed lava flows extending only 1.2 miles, 2 kilometers from the vent. It's advanced a little bit since then over the course of the day, but it's still ballpark in there. Channels below this point appear drained of lava and probably no longer feed the main flow front. The inactive main flow front remains stalled about 1.7 miles, 2.8 kilometers from the Saddle Road, DKI highway. And yesterday, December 8th, the inactive main flow inched northward very slowly at about 7 feet, 2 meters per hour as it settled. So 2 meters, about 2 yards an hour there. 24 hours, 40 yards, so about 50 yards is how much it's settled out, and that's because that center part of it is fatter, and so it's just by gravity just settling down and squeezing out to the edges. And so not expected to progress much further, really. It's being termed stall by just about everybody now. So we'll see if it actually has had any advance today, and if so, it's going to be very, very little, like you see report from this morning. Sulfur dioxide emission rates were also reduced to approximately 30,000 tons per day. Now that's still a huge amount for industrial standards, but compared to what we saw yesterday was at 130,000. Before that it was 120,000. Before that to 150,000. So it's down quite a bit. And according to what Dr. Ken Han mentioned today, Civil Defense had a Facebook Live event, and he answered a bunch of questions. They suggest that the emission rate has gone down even further today from yesterday, down from this 30 tons that's reported yesterday. They do note, and I've been skipping this for a few days, but this is this is becoming more important. Tremor associated with subsurface fluid movement continues beneath the currently active fissure. This indicates magma is still being supplied to the fissure, and activity is likely to continue as long as we see this signal. So tremor is still there. This is not something that's easy to show to you guys, largely because there's been so much wind up in the mountain the last couple of days, and that obscures our signals a little bit. It's something we'll rely on the USGS to report to us here. So here they note, and this is a new statement, the significance of the reduced supply of lava is not yet clear. It is common for eruptions to wax and wane or to pause completely. A return to high levels of lava discharge could occur, and the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory continues to closely monitor this activity. So that's the real change there. They're still considering all the possibilities, even if it's not the average case, and those lower probability chances that occur. So that is the morning update. The update from this afternoon, 3:30 p.m. Fairly similar. As of 11:30 a.m. today, the vent continues to be significantly reduced, with low fountains feeding flows that only extend to 1.65 miles, 2.65 kilometers from the vent in a northeast direction. Channels below this point appear drained of lava and probably no longer feed the main flow front. So that's the updated number, so you can see advance maybe not quite close to a half a mile today from that upper level, and it still puts it way up the mountain in the range of probably a 11,000 feet elevation in there. We'll have here shortly. So that's the only new information in the afternoon update. So show you the map. There is a most recent map from 11:15 today, December 9th. And let's just zoom into the front here. The flow front is now inactive. You can see they've actually drawn, if I zoom in enough, there's a tiny little sliver of red in there. That's that 7 feet that it just creeped just in that one little area right there. So that seems to be likely done. And then moving upslope, everything is inactive. There was a flow yesterday that was down in this red zone right here, but is also being marked now inactive. And if I scroll it down a little more, there's our Fissure 3 vent right there. And there, this red dot is that lowest lava flow front that's active, confined in a channel 11:15 a.m. today. So there is that 1.65 miles, 2.65 kilometers right there. And you can see just below that 11,000 foot contour. So it's really high up there, very, very close to the rift. And what that looks like, this is a picture from yesterday. So if I zoom it in, still see a little bit of that higher fountaining from yesterday at the vent. But maybe you can follow over this way. This right in here is a lava channel. And it looks like it's pretty viscous, like an flow here, and then here is a flow front all the way down to here, flow front, and just the red poking out from underneath that debris that's carried on top. There. So this was the lowest one yesterday, and it's roughly about in that same area today. Right? So not that far downhill of the vent. So the vent is putting out just a trickle of lava, and it's leaking out. And it's coming out into some of these flows and into that channel as well. So we'll look at that a little bit more. So let's look at some of the visuals. This is the UH 2.2 meter live stream. So you can see there is that vent putting out some gas still, not nearly that giant column from before. And you can see a couple of spots of glow here on that flow front. But overall, a lot less red and a lot less lava visible, even from last night when we were out on the Saddle Road, Dane, and looking at this. Pretty drastic reduction, huh? Once again, on the hillside.
Yeah, I mean, last night it was a dramatic reduction just looking at it from 24 hours previous of that. So, and I mean, now it's, I wonder how much you can see it type of thing without assistance.
Yeah, so there's going to be some glow visible, but it's not really that 10-mile ribbon of red with all those braids and fingers that was on display previously. So interesting to follow how this is going to track, and interesting to hear the county say that if it comes down to just glow and there's not a lot else visible, they may consider shutting down that traffic hazard mitigation route, since there's really no benefit of being in one spot there than the other, and less reason for people to gather along the road. And so opening areas that are designated, but not that long 5-mile stretch of road that goes across the military base.
Right. You shouldn't have the demand, and like the peak times that we were hearing about up there last weekend was absolutely crazy. So we definitely needed that for at that point in time. But now the demand really shouldn't be there because there's not as much lava to see. There's really nothing to see right now. A little bit of glow, but that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a time where just I would have traveled all the way here just to see some glow in Maunaloa. That would have been epic for me. 25-year ago me, right? So people are probably still coming. Everyone is trying to come in at their own different pace, and we'll probably still have visitors coming to look at it and pay their respects. But yeah, it does appear like the viewing is past its prime for sure, and it seems to be a different kind of experience nowadays. There's that zoomed out view and much, much different.
Served its purpose, basically.
Yeah, and been much appreciated too. And presented its challenges, but of course that is a motivation to improve upon it for the next time. So let's look into the live USGS camera once again here. So there it is. Maybe if I zoom it in even further, get a better view of that feature in the back that's putting out all this gas, and then the lava seems to drain out from that hole in the front right there. We do have a set of photos released today, December 9th by the USGS, and this includes a few videos that will show you a compilation of here shortly, and images for comparison. So that's what the event looked like a couple of days ago with the higher fountains, the channel full and draining out of there all the way down. And I think it's awesome to see these photographs of those last fountains. And one thing I wanted to point out in this one is that you can really see this long profile of the cone here. There's a lava channel going out. And when we're seeing these high fountains and the vent changes from that camera, we're looking at this front part right over here. So you can note that if we were to split this thing in half 2 days ago, the higher fountains are happening here on that opening end, right, on this right-hand side, the eastern end of the fissure. So we'll see that is different from where the gas is coming out now in the back part. So that's interesting how that's just changed. And different frontal view here. And once again, USGS images, and these are all set taken by Tim Orr, who is known to many island residents for his time at HVO as well. So, show you the movie. I'll start off with a movie that was released yesterday, and there is that Fissure 3 cone and the lava channel full, and I'll just play this just for comparison so you can visually see the difference from what it looked like a couple of days ago to this morning. So still full and flowing, and remember that the downhill areas of the lava channel were starting to break down already at this point. This is the uphill close to the vent area where it was still all intact, and there's the fissure fountains feeding that whole flow. So let's switch to the compilation we have from today's video release. And there is that same channel right through there. So it's got a lot of dark, hardened lava inside, and within it, inside of those levees, there's a little trickle of lava channel in there. So it's still a big thing compared to people, but it's a lot less than that bigger canyon that it was filling just a few days ago. And looking closer to the vent, here you can see that standing fountain, like a dome fountain here in the back of the vent, feeding, looks like a big pahoehoe flow. It's just cascading down. This was taken on a USGS flight early in the morning. You can see that low angle of the sun putting the shadow right there. And let me see if I can pull it back. There, yeah. So you can also see that this back part of the cone on this farther western part, this crack where the lava is coming out actually extends through this, right? And the reason the cone is actually here is this was a spot of more spattering and less spattering happening over here. So when it actually landed, it formed this near vertical back wall right here. But it's still the same crack that connects underneath this entire thing from this vent area on the right side that we saw in that photograph was active, more so during a higher fountaining phase yesterday. So it shifted to the back of the cone here, and it's also got a glowing hole putting out a whole bunch of fume back behind it here as well. So that's the view from this morning, and you can see the picture from yesterday for comparison once again. There is those fountains on the right. You can actually see, when you look closely, you can actually see that hole already existed, and it was putting out fume before that fountain switched to the backside of the cone right through here. So you can see gas venting here and here, and that's obviously different from what we just saw from this morning. So play it one more time, this this morning segment right here, especially the cone. You can see the nice open lava filling the surface, and it's still not all the way crusted over. You can see it's forming a crust, but it's all still moving. So this is all hardened up now, and the lava is draining underneath this and trickling out down into the channel there. So that was earlier in the morning. We did have some video contributions today from Andrew Hara as well. So let me share these videos that he took from his flight. And by this point in time, you see there is the fountain in the back still, that standing dome fountain, but no longer do we see this open channel in the front. It's all hardened over. Lava's going underneath all here. You see it popping out right in there, and then feeding this trickle into the channel. And so it's a little bit later in the day, and the lava isn't quite as red. It's more reflective and silvery down in here, but that's the same system. And one more share with you guys. Let me zoom it in a little more. So there's that fume spot on the back of the cone, long profile of the cone, standing fountain coming to view right there, and you can see how it was all hardened. And there's that main channel. It's just a trickle of lava visible in some places in it, right down in here, for example. So pretty interesting changes, changing fast at the end of this phase of eruption. We'll see if this phase is really the last phase or if there's something further to come, but in any case, this is the transition out of this current phase that we're seeing here. So that was the overflight of the cone, and just to synthesize it and put together the video we did yesterday. So here's that video from yesterday before the high fountain started, coming into the high fountain regime, higher fountain, right? These are not truly high fountains. And then the cone moving and changing shape and bulging and putting out an extra flow, and then everything petering back down overnight, and then there it is, very, very low fountains once again. So pretty cool. Once again, if you look closely, you can actually, I don't know if I can pick any of these out, but there's several images in here. If you actually look closely, you can see the helicopter landed and the geologists are down there walking around, taking more samples once again. Let's see if I zoom it way in. Here's a geologist right there. I don't know if I have it that we can actually see the helicopter on here or not, but helicopter comes in and parks. Oh, there it is. Parks right there, picks them up, and it flies out of there, out and around the cone. So there they are, still collecting samples, working hard, getting some ground truth for all the different aerial views and satellites and everything that we have that are informing this eruption. So the downslope channels, we don't have a great time lapse of that. But we do have the MK2 camera we've been showing you guys, so here it is. I'm just going to warn you before I play it. It's been extremely windy up there, so this video is bouncing around a bit and it's coming in and out of focus a little bit, but this does describe the conditions up on Mauna Kea for last night, and still continuing now, the high wind making it hard. So there we see that flow and how high up the flows are right in there. Camera bouncing around, and here comes the daytime, and still really windy throughout the course of the day. So we'll pull it back to pause it, and maybe one of these frames right in here. And there you can see there is that upper vent, and how far down a mountain visibly the flow was actually coming last night. So you can see these other spots of red. Those are places where the lava channel has drained, but there's still some heat and some areas of glow coming out of that channel, and you can't quite see the bottom flow that was approaching saddle and is now stalled. But it also has a tiny bit of glow at the very bottom, or at least it did last night. Checking the cameras. Seeing as it's come dark now, let's turn to the USGS cameras and reload it to show us the view in present time in the dark. So there's the M8 that we've just been looking into the live view. The M9 of the viewing area, we can't really see that lava toe. It looks like it's too much weather in a way, but there's some visitors driving on the traffic hazard mitigation route that we don't have lawyers insisting we call it that rather than the lava viewing road, so we call it both. And here is an M5 camera showing now that west side of the cone with the fume, and that's where the lava's inside. You can't really see the lava up here anymore. We'll probably see this glowing a little later, although it looks like maybe the camera is not hasn't updated it to my screen here. All right, moving on. There's M6. Let's go to when it's more interesting. There's a channel still flowing in a channel up here, and once we see this uppermost channel by the M4 cam, I think the vent is probably just off screen to the right here. Then we'll know that it's really backed up all the way to the vent, or when eruption ends, this will be one of the cameras to check if that actually is happening or not. Although the glow can be a little misleading there. So M7, nothing there. There is the MK2, and there you do see at the very bottom a little bit of that glow from that lava flow. Bit of it, that's still oozing a tiny bit and settling right there. Relatively speaking, right, this image of right now, there is the vent, a couple of spots of the glowing channel and a little bit of the glowing toe below, and let's compare that to this that we just saw last night, and you can see it's reduced quite a bit less visibly as well. Not to say that there won't be further pulses and other flows that might be visible occasionally, but it's not sustained to the level that it was before. So that is the imagery there. We'll turn to the VMAP fog forecast dashboard here, and there is the mapped predicted fog dispersal areas near the ground surface. A lot of upslope areas, but largely Kona as well, and then you can see this upslope of Ocean View and upslope of Pahalanalehu as well. So just to continue to document this, let's turn to purple air, and it doesn't look nearly as bad as yesterday, but there are still some impacts over here in this central Kona coast area. You can see some of the yellows popping through here. I won't belabor the point, we've been talking about this every day, so let's move on to the earthquakes. Here are the map of earthquakes for the last day. Fairly sparse compared to what we're used to seeing. Maunaloa has got a whole bunch of nothing. That's really change, right? No earthquakes at all on the last day. There's Kilauea's got 1, and then all the rest are down here in Pahala. And only 14 earthquakes in this entire area over the last 24 hours. So looking at some of the data, here is, let's look at the earthquake rates. Here is past month's earthquake rates on Maunaloa. And the last day was almost none, and here we are just about at almost none again too, or actually at none. So there is our eruption right there when we had that flurry of earthquakes. It was about 190, somewhere in that range, almost 200 earthquakes in that day that lava broke through to the Northeast Rift, and then some adjustment earthquakes continuing afterwards, and it's really tailed off to nothing, right? And this is one of the signals that the geologists can lean upon to say that it does not appear that magma is pushing its way through unbroken rock, because if so, we'd see the earthquakes, and that would be what you'd expect if the vent was gonna migrate. So it seems highly unlikely that the vent will move anywhere else now. If it were to move, it would only be able to move downhill on a northeast rift, and as we just said, that seems highly unlikely. So that's the earthquake rates. The other interesting thing here, and the reason to be a little careful and just to wait and see, is the tilt signal at the summit. You can see that a couple of days ago it turned from this deflationary trend to now an inflationary trend. That means that magma is collecting in the volcano, right? And that by itself is not necessarily a surprise. We've seen this with many eruptions in the past, where pretty soon after the eruption ends, they start to show inflation as magma comes in from below to replace that's erupted. It kind of re-equilibrates in a way. It's just a matter of whether it's a new batch that's hot that's going to be able to utilize that eruptive pathway and get all the way out. And as we've said, on average, that doesn't seem to happen, but it can happen occasionally. And this is one of the reasons why they're being wary of that potential for a long-term continuous eruption. Just one of the clues that is a little ambiguous. Doesn't hurt to keep an eye out. Sure. So that's the tilt there. We can wrap up Maunaloa there and really talk about the connection to Kilauea a little bit, because it's something that USGS continues to talk about. Here is the F1 camera from about an hour ago. You see just one small pad of lava down in there. Otherwise, everything is crusted over. The KW camera, here's the last 24 hours. So if you were wondering how much glow there was last night, here's a spot of glow, that little cluster of red pixels right there in the middle. And a whole bunch of darkness elsewhere, so maybe I should zoom it in so you have a chance to see it. But that was really the context of what it used to look like, and now you see those little spots of glow. So there's still some glow to be seen at Kilauea, not nearly as much as before. It depends on the weather, of course. It's not as bright as before, so all of that can be a challenge for visitors trying to view. So similar conditions, deteriorating viewing conditions for both Kilauea and Maunaloa at the time. However, it's worth noting that Dr. Han says that once Maunaloa actually began its eruption, and that the magma that was inside of it that was bulging it outwards was able to depressurize to the surface and relieve that pressure, Maunaloa kind of sagged in response. And that allowed Kilauea, which is still filling with magma underground and still swelling, to then push all the way up back against Maunaloa again. So it's almost like an accordion in a way, right? It's kind of move the boundary back and forth, and Kilauea can extend more or Maunaloa can contract more, and it just happens that when they're both trying to expand at the same time, that's when they're pushing each other and quaking a lot. That's what we're seeing the last months. But since the eruption happened, Maunaloa sagged and Kilauea now can expand towards it there. So perhaps because a magma chamber has more room, it's not fully pressurized, and if it's not fully pressurized, then maybe it doesn't have to put lava all the way up to the surface through its open conduit there. So if that's indeed what's happened, he suspected that it might reemerge to the surface in 1 or 2 weeks, perhaps. It really depends on if that's what's going to happen, or if there is some other adjustments underground that continue to happen in Kilauea. But that is basically what's happening there. There's no cause for concern from anyone else on Kilauea outside of the national park at this point. Keep saying that someday this will change, but this is not what we're seeing at present. So that's the wider KW camera view. And here is a V1 camera for the last 24 hours. You can see largely press it over for a lot of it. Keep your eye over here on the right side. You'll see that there are a few lava breakouts that occur. Not constantly, but occasionally you're getting those breakouts happening. So let me reload this and scroll it up to get the most current view, and there it is, and there's a little breakout of lava happening right now for the sunset viewers. So that is what we are seeing here on Kilauea. The graphs on Kilauea, let's scroll this up. The lava level did reduce. Oh, I better freshen this graph here. Let's reload it and freshen the graph. The lava level did drop down, but it see a little lava bowl, a little lava pad causing this little deviation here. But essentially, it's dropped down, and really, it's kind of something like this with that one, that western side of it, building that little lava pad. So it's the last week, and if you look at the summit tilt, now we're seeing this deflation-inflation pattern once again, but now it appears to be slightly more in a rising, just with this one view. Maybe if we zoom out, look here at the 1 month long, and you can see that there's an overall pattern of like a little bit shorter here, but it's at the very least it's stable, and maybe it's slightly increasing now, which might show that the magma is pushing its way back through now that it's adjusting to the end stages of Maunaloa's eruption, possibly the end stages of the eruption. Kilauea gas is still very little. That's why it's down here in a 300 ton per day. And so Kilauea 300, Maunaloa is low at 30,000. That's still at 100 times more than Kilauea. So that's really the one we're talking about for the VOG for the most part here. So that's the story on Kilauea. We do have to cover the one more thing from the USGS, which is the Volcano Watch. But before we do that, I just wanted to quickly remind you of some of our community events, including tomorrow in Hilo. We'll be at the University of Hawaii Hilo Campus Center Plaza, talking story as part of the Resilience Hub outreach with Vibrant Hawaii at the Hilo Makahiki event, and hosted by University of Hawaii Hilo and Ho'ola Farms Resilience Hubs there. So this is about preparedness, about talking story, about what's happening on the volcanoes, about networking with all of our community members and neighbors to be prepared for any kind of disaster, not just the volcanoes. And there's art, performances, storytelling, health and well-being demonstrations, free cake activities. At the last couple of events, they've had a little passport where you go to all different tables and you talk story with them, and they'll give you a little stamp. And while supplies last, they'll give you an emergency supply bucket, so like a 5-gallon bucket with emergency supplies loaded in it, to be the start of your preparedness kit if you don't have one already, or to help augment if you have one already. So come check us out tomorrow. Dan and I will be there 10 to 1 at UA. Also tomorrow is the Kahuku Pohui public meeting for the national park over in Na'aleu Hongwanji. That's 1 to 3 p.m. And otherwise, there are other events in the national park that we mentioned. Kamehameha School's holiday concert at 7 p.m. tomorrow, and another concert by John Kiave and Naleo Manu on Wednesday, the 14th, 7 to 8 p.m. And a lot of the other usual activities that park hosts as usual. So just once I've cleared those reminders, let's talk about the Volcano Watch, because I'm sure this will lead us into our questions and thank yous. This is response to Mauna Loa's 2022 eruption. The first few hours of Mauna Loa's eruption were dynamic. Volcanologists intently watched monitoring data to track changing conditions and understand how the eruption was developing. This monitoring is crucial to issuing hazard notifications to communities that may be at risk, and is why we continue to closely monitor this new eruption. So they give some background. The monitoring data showing increased activity for several months beforehand, the earthquakes in September, the switch from weekly to daily updates, the community meetings that were held, and Ocean View, South Kona, and Pahala. Then they note the actual sequence of events of the eruption here. So eruption begins at 11:30 p.m. The handful of scientists that responded to alarms about 45 minutes before the eruption began from the earthquakes quickly turned into an online meeting of 15 to 20 experts in seismology, deformation, geology, and satellite imagery. Additionally, the civil defense was immediately appraised of the behavior, both in the online meeting and with the addition of volcanologists who quickly went to the Emergency Operations Center in Hilo. Scientists from USGS observatories in Alaska, California, and Washington also joined to assist. Primary concern was the eruption might shift towards the southwest rift zone. And because lava from that area can reach populated areas within hours, they wanted to really make sure they could recognize any early signs of a rift zone eruption just in case. So, a few hours after the eruption started, images began to appear on social media of lava flows visible from Kona. In the dark, these flows looked menacing, and the public had clear concerns that the eruption had made its way into the southwest rift zone. Indeed, the fissure that first opened in Mokuave'oveo continued opening towards the south, outside the topographic caldera, but still inside Mauna Loa's summit region. This produced a lava flow on the southwest side of the summit that was visible from the Kona coast. These flows did not threaten any populated areas and were ultimately short-lived. Monitoring data, all the different things, tilt, seismic cameras, thermal, satellite, and infrasound, continue to show eruption was focused at the summit. Volcanologists remain glued to computer screens, and at 6 a.m. on the 28th, reports from the ground and satellite showed eruption had moved in the northeast rift zone. Infrasound confirmed it, cameras confirmed it, and confirmed the summit area eruption had stopped. They were in the air at first light, flying over to confirm everything and check on all the remote data. So history suggests that once the Maunaloa eruption moves into one rift zone, it stays there. So that was really that big moment where we knew there was going to be limited impact to the southwest rift. However, and this is I'm interjecting here, right there, we do have feedback from the community about that first few hours, especially from the Kona side. And it took a while, and a question even came up today in discussion: is the southwest rift zone actually still in the clear? So the message is still bears repeating. So that's the sequence there. They do note those tense few hours served as a good demonstration of how HVO is able to work with Hawaii County civil defense officials and other volcanologists from USGS offices to rapidly respond. Together, they continue to monitor and keep the public informed. So that is basically it. There's other updates here. They say future Mauna Loa eruptions from the summit, either rift zone or radio events, are inevitable, but it is impossible to forecast precisely when those might happen. The monitoring networks from HVO plus high-level community awareness provide the best mitigation for hazards from any such eruption. HVO is grateful to the island of Hawaii for your support, awareness, and engagement during this latest eruption crisis. Maunaloa, and Malamapono. So yeah, that's where we fit in. This level of community awareness is what we're trying to bring to you guys. Education to improve preparedness, right? That's what is going to mitigate hazards. That's the same thing we're talking about as well. So Dane, I'll open that up to you to start us off here and talk about this.
Yeah, we were live streaming for the beginning of the eruption, and so we were going through this all live and seeing the reports and everything along those lines for the first 4 hours at least of the eruption, and we had posts as well on Hawaii Tracker that announced that the earthquakes were happening before the eruption. The first frames of the eruption, as soon as they came out, released to the public via the webcams. So yeah, it was all hands on deck, but really it's part of just education, really, too, the sequence, right, and why we designate the summit as being down further than just the caldera, because it is somewhat simple to know, like, okay, starts at the summit, and then it goes into if it's going to go into the rift zone, it picks one, and then it stays in it, right? But you have to be able to find the summit accurately to be able to not come into a circumstance like we had this time, where it's coming out of the caldera, but it's still within the summit. The lava flows are coming down the slope, but that's not unusual for a Mauna Loa eruption. That's can be tacked into the starting sequence, all of it, right? And that's what we were trying to do at the time, and then wait for the real signal, right? Because that's really what you're looking for, is that signal that came across at 6 a.m. Like, hey, it is moving into the rift zone, and we got it. It's here, right? So that was the real one, where it was time to actually announce the rift zone, right? I know everybody sees it coming down, but it's miles away, right? And that's some kind of I think next time it'll maybe be a little bit better, because people have now seen that, right? That sequence and what it looks like from Kona and around, right? Because it does look like it's coming at you. But that's, if Mauna Loa goes again, it might do that again. The same look.
Yeah, for sure. We showed maps of how the southwest extent of that summit area flow is similar to the 1984 footprint, similar to 75 footprint, and it's pretty common that actually happens. So it's something for us to, I suppose we're being re-educated, especially the Kona side viewers that look up and now know what that looks like, and how much further it's got to go from there to actually be in that southwest rift zone. So for sure, we did see the USGS putting out their alert notifications as they said they would, right? They actually didn't have a chance to put out one for the earthquakes. The eruption happened within an hour of the earthquakes. So we kind of skipped that initial one, but it did say some eruptions happening. It did say it's moving to Northeast Rift, and they have kind of kept things up since then. Interesting to hear that they actually were in a room with civil defense. One of the pieces of feedback we've heard from many, I'm hearing this every day, residents in that Ka'u, South Kona area, there was no civil defense alert that the eruption actually had begun. So people woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, eruption had been going for 6 hours already, and they're like, well, how come no one told me? Like, how come there was no siren? Like, what's going on here? What if it came my direction? Like, how much time were you going to give me? Kind of thing, right? So
right.
I think those are valid concerns for sure. It's something that we'll make sure to take to civil defense. I'm sure they've heard it already, but we can repeat it because we are hearing it from the community as well. That could be a point of improvement for the next time. So I think that was part of the concern too. Not just so much seeing the flows, but then not everyone has the USGS notifications. They're waiting for civil defense or something on the radio, or waiting for a siren, right? And we heard Talmadge Magna today, civil defense administrator, talk about how one gentleman actually got a phone call from his neighbors because he'd actually done well to set up that notification system, having someone call him in advance, because that's what worked for him. So those fail, backup methods are always worth putting in place, right? Maybe don't rely on that message coming through. Maybe don't rely on the sirens, and make sure that there are backup systems, but hopefully those things do happen as well in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we got lucky kind of with the it caught everybody at kind of a rough time, that 11:30 start, because on a Sunday a lot of people were just getting to bed, right? And then it was then the signals started to come across that started to look interesting, but they weren't super interesting. They weren't like those key earthquake ramp up 1,000 earthquakes in an hour. No, it's just some big shallow ones, right? Not that big either, but big enough to make you curious. Right. So yeah, we were on it for now, a week and a half at least going. I think we've done something like 20 to 24 live streams, somewhere in that range. So yeah, I think tomorrow we're not going to do a live stream, probably not Sunday either. Take the weekend off on the live streaming front, just to announce that here and now. Seems like a decent point to recuperate at.
Yeah, for sure. If something does change, we'll definitely jump back in. But otherwise, we're going to be actually live in person at Hilo tomorrow, so you can come talk with us there. If we do a live, it'll be just like showing what's going on there and like not a volcano update. And yeah, it's been a lot of coverage in the last 2 weeks, and we'll see if there's another phase. Then we're gonna once again make sure we're rested for that if it does come.
I don't know how we did 2018, like the pace of it. Like, I guess it was just pure adrenaline, and there's not, like, the adrenaline on this one really went out after, like, day 2 for us. Like, there were day 3, maybe. Like, the real adrenaline of it. In 2018, it was adrenaline for 3 months. Like, every day. The days where we were trying to recuperate were days where the volcano's absolutely throwing. Like, just huge volumes down. And it's just like, well, it's consistently throwing at least, so let's get some rest, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, really, I mean, it's sad to reflect on this, but like, really, it at one point had destroyed everything it possibly could destroy. There's nothing left to destroy, and like, then we said, okay, well, at least there's nothing left to destroy, you know.
True, right?
So I mean,
that point.
But yeah, that was terrible. Yeah, I'm glad we're not facing that this year.
All right.
So yeah, let's do a few questions, wrap it up.
Yeah, so I've answered most of the questions in the chat. They've just been like SO2 and things along those lines. So my question to you is about the Pahoehoe phase of the eruption that we've talked about previously. And are we now seeing that Pahoehoe phase? Is that what this is, like in the Maunaloa eruption standard sequence?
Maybe. I haven't heard it confirmed them say that it actually is Pahoehoe. I did hear Ken say that the lava is sticky lava, right? So it could be coming out still more gas rich and fluid, where it might become Pahoehoe, but it might be turning into that texture pretty quickly, as we saw that flow just a mile away from the vent. So kind of hard to tell. You know, I'm not convinced, but we don't have the evidence to really see that. I mean, if there's lava coming out, then how do you tell what it is, right? I mean, it's got to actually make a flow for us to see. So we'll see. I mean, if it is Pahoehoe, it should be tubing itself over and then feeding a flow front in that manner, and that's something we'll see development probably in the next couple of days. So that's when we'll get more clues. It was really in the next few days to see if that's actually happening. But otherwise, I'm not convinced yet.
Right. Question from Matt. Does this latest flow offer any protection for the highway for future northwest flows?
Northeast rift zone flows, maybe?
Yeah. I think northwest flows off the northeast rift.
Yeah, I mean, it's we described how it was right along that dividing line, right, where it could have gone east or west. So now it's basically making a ridge where any further flow is going to divide even further one side of it or the other side. So if it's on the one side, it's going to be going to Hilo, and the other side would be going on towards ETA and Kona. But that's, so yeah, maybe it makes it less likely that one comes right over top of it and can go both ways or either way, like this one just did. It depends, right? If it gets around to the tip and wraps around the tip of it, then that can be back in play. So maybe a little bit, but
right
where it flowed down is.
I think the decisive point of that, the fall lines, the steepest descent lines, and where it goes is just after the point that it got to. So yeah. Pretty interesting. We do have a $9.99 super chat from Hal, who says, I was up all night when it started. I'm in the 3 hour to ocean area, the 3 hours for the southwest rift zone to reach the ocean. Mahalo nui for all the information I needed. I appreciate that, Hal, for the support there. Yeah. Really interesting the last 48 hours, but it really is, as Dr. Hahn was saying, it's kind of the expectation for Maunaloa. It's not the interesting volcano right now. It's Kilauea, even though it's crusted over, it's doing some interesting nuanced things that is more interesting for the experts that are looking at this every day. Have studied all the past eruptions, because this one, it really does match the past eruptions on Mauna
Yeah. I see the question here from Nathan. Should we do this one?
Yeah. Nathan asks, what's the average length of a Mauna Loa eruption?
So pulled this tweet back up from Tom Shea, who's over at UH Manila. And he has divided these into eruptions on a northeast rift, a flank right here, or the summit itself, right? So here is eruption duration in days, and then how many eruptions actually are. Right? So you can see that most eruptions on Mauna Loa are in that within 1 month, or really like 3 week-ish kind of time period. And here are some outliers when it went 90 days, and looks like 3 of them that went in a range of 300 plus days or so. So it can happen. And that's why we say the average and the expectation case is somewhere in here. But so as far as what you'd expect on average, right? If this was Vegas, you'd bet on it falling in this zone rather than anywhere outside of there. But of course, if you're civil defense and USGS, you prepare for this possibility of it coming. Watch for that as well. That's when it's coming out the flank. The summit is really skewed towards really short, right? So when it's coming out of the summit, almost always it's lasting less than 2 weeks. But there are already a handful of cases where it can have long-lasting eruptions. But this is the summit is making a lava lake up at the summit, and it's not necessarily affecting other areas, depending exactly which way it's spilling out. So that's the stats, Nathan, and why the USGS was early on saying expect a 2 to 3 week kind of event. And here we are. It's going to be 2 weeks on Sunday. If it can hold out, and we'll see what the final number actually is. Yeah.
Yeah, see what the final phase has in store for us. All right. I don't really see any more questions. Lots of comments about the KAU messaging and the people that were sleeping through it and didn't get notified. And that's why I've been saying that this is such a great run to have happen, right? Because I am still hesitant to say that we were prepared if it did go southwest, and it did go into it, one of the bad case eruptions that we've seen historically. But with this eruption under the belt, potentially, right? Because we're going to have a lot of things to learn and improve upon on a run that didn't get anything other than the Maunaloa Observatory Road. And that comes with the territory of putting an observatory up on Mauna Loa, that the road would get cut. So
ETA fence, yeah, pretty minor, really.
ETA fence, real minor. Didn't get the road, type of thing. So next time, it's like we have all this experience under the belt, all this knowing what to expect a little bit more, and figuring out the logistics on the emergency management side and information distribution when things escalate really quickly, like it did a week and a half ago on Sunday.
Yeah, and one wonderful thing is no one has to wonder what the county and civil defense would do, because you've just seen what they would do, and now you can give them feedback, right? Because now you know for sure what they. We've been asking what exactly is the plan. We saw what the plan, what the following a plan produced. So now we hopefully can improve upon that.
Yeah.
So if we answered every question, Dan, we must have been doing a good job the last 2 weeks. Let's give ourselves a break.
Or we've drowned everybody in information at this point.
Yeah,
one of the two.
No one can absorb anymore, right? in which case, we'd also better shut up. So we'll keep posting as we can. We'll be in UH tomorrow. Any final words?
No, appreciate everybody that stuck with us, and like, subscribe, all those things. They really do help with the algorithm. I know everybody's sick of hearing about it, but it's true, and that's the day and age in which we live in. So appreciate everybody that tuned in today. And if we missed a question, we'll try and get them into the comments.
Yeah, one more thing. If you guys are, every guys who are in a KAU, if you'd like us to relay that message as well, you can just feel free to drop those comments about your experience on the video as well, right? And we pass it along, or make sure that the county people can see it as well.
There is one last question if we want to grab that one.
One last one.
Yeah. Why does the DAND seismograph on the southwest rift zone, Maunaloa, keep showing tremor more than at the summit, the MOKD, or near the eruption?
It really depends on the position of it. My shot in the dark guess is it's more exposed to wind, and wind is something that's making it hard to see any actual real tremor right now in other places, and often the wind will show us some kind of vibration like a. So that's my guess. DAND, I think it's dandelion. That's station code. Yeah, that's my best guess. I'd probably have to go and look at the webcam and see if we can see it open on the, or see the webcam and look at the Google Earth, and I can probably see the thing in the middle of a lava field and be like, oh, it looks like it's pretty exposed. But I'm not going to do all that. It's been a long 2 weeks already. Yeah. So that's the best guess.
All right. Well, I think that does it for all the information and questions, answers, all that fun stuff. We will be back. I'm not exactly sure when, but at least after the weekend, at least.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll try to get maybe on Monday just to catch up. If the thing actually does end or doesn't end, we'll be able to give an update. But we may not be going every day next week once again, because believe it or not, we have other obligations that we've just dropped to make sure we could bring information in a timely manner. But we do need to get back to that here as the year wraps up, and especially if the eruption is going to wrap up too. See how that goes. Yeah,
we have some things we need to write up still, deadlines. So yeah,
it's grant application period again.
That too.
Sure. So, from HawaiiTracker.com, he's Dane DuPont. I'm Philip Ong.